$3.50. That was the price of the black coffee that destroyed Molly Vance's life, and then rebuilt it into something unrecognizable. When the disheveled old man at table 4 couldn't find his wallet, Molly didn't see a billionaire industrialist testing the waters of humanity. She didn't see Arthur Sterling, the Iron Wolf of Wall Street, looking for a soul worthy of his empire. She just saw a shivering pair of hands and a lonely Tuesday afternoon. She swiped her own debit card, unaware that a camera across the street was recording every second, and that her simple act of kindness had just painted a target on her back. The man wasn't just hungry, he was hunting for an heir, and the Sharks and his family were ready to kill to keep the bloodline pure. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean, it just made the grime slicker. Molly Vance wiped the counter of Jerry's Diner for the 30th time that hour, the smell of stale grease and burnt coffee clinging to her hair like a second skin. It was 2:45 p.m. on a Tuesday in November, the dead zone between the lunch rush and the early bird dinner crowd. Outside, the gray sky pressed down on the city, mirroring the weight pressing on Molly's chest. She checked her phone surreptitiously beneath the counter. A notification from First National Bank flashed on the screen. Balance, $42.18. She swallowed the lump in her throat. Rent was due in 4 days. Her mother's medication copay at the Oakwood Care Facility was already a week late. $42. It wasn't enough to survive, let alone live. Molly! Stop staring at your phone and refill the sugar dispensers. The voice of Rick, the manager, cut through the diner like a rusty saw. Rick was a man who believed kindness was a bad business model. He stood by the kitchen pass, wiping his oily forehead with a rag that had seen better days. On it, Rick, Molly said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion dragging at her eyelids. The bell above the door jingled. A gust of wet, freezing wind swept through the diner, making the few patrons shiver. Molly looked up. The man who entered looked like he had been chewed up by the city and spat out on the sidewalk. He was elderly, perhaps in his late 70s, with a stoop to his shoulders that spoke of decades of heavy burdens. He wore an oversized tweed coat that was soaked through, the elbows patched and fraying. His gray hair was plastered to his skull, and his hands, clutching a cane, trembled violently. He didn't look like a customer. He looked like a problem. Table 4. Molly called out softly, gesturing to a booth near the radiator. It's the warmest spot. The old man looked up, his eyes a piercing, startling blue amidst a map of wrinkles. He nodded once, a silent gesture of gratitude, and shuffled toward the booth. As Molly approached with a menu, Rick intercepted her. He grabbed her upper arm, his fingers digging into her uniform. Don't get too cozy, Rick hissed, keeping his voice low but venomous. If he smells like booze, or if he can't pay, you kick him out. We aren't a shelter. He's just an old man, Rick. It's pouring outside. I don't care if it's a hurricane. Paying customers only. Molly pulled her arm away and walked to the table. Up close, the man smelled of old rain and peppermint, not alcohol. He was staring at the laminated menu as if it were a complex legal document. Just coffee, he rasped. His voice sounded unused, like a door that hadn't been opened in years. Black, please. Coming right up, Molly said, offering a small, genuine smile. I'll bring you some water, too. She moved efficiently, pouring the dark roast into a thick ceramic mug. When she returned, the old man was staring out the window at the relentless traffic on Lexington Avenue. He looked profoundly lonely. Here you go, she said, placing the mug down. He reached for it, his hands shaking so bad the coffee sloshed over the rim. He flinched, expecting a reprimand. It's okay, Molly said quickly, pulling a napkin from her apron and wiping the spill. Happens all the time. Can I get you anything else to eat? Maybe a muffin? The man hesitated. His hand went to his coat pocket. He patted it. Then he checked the other pocket. His movements grew frantic. He stood up slightly, patting his trousers, checking the inside of the wet coat. The color drained from his face. I seem to have... He looked at Molly, his eyes wide with humiliation. My wallet. I had it on the bus. I can't find it. From the kitchen pass, Rick was watching like a hawk. He began to march over, his face purple with anticipated rage. "I am so sorry, miss," the old man stammered, starting to rise. "I will leave. I won't drink it." "Sit down," Molly whispered urgently. "But I cannot pay." "I said sit down." Molly stepped between the old man and the approaching manager. She pulled her own debit card from her apron pocket, the card that held the last $42.18 to her name. "It's fine," Molly said, her voice loud enough for Rick to hear. "He's a regular. He paid up front. I just forgot to ring it in." She walked to the register, keyed in the coffee, $3.50, and swiped her card. The machine beeped. Approved. Balance, $38.68. Rick stopped a few feet away, suspicious. "He paid?" "Yes, Rick. He gave me a $5. It's in the till." She lied effortlessly, her heart hammering against her ribs. She couldn't afford to lose this job, but she couldn't watch an old man get thrown into the rain over $3. Rick grunted, eyeing the old man with disdain, then turned back to the kitchen. Molly returned to table 4. The old man was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. It wasn't creepy. It was calculating. Analytical. "Why did you do that?" he asked. The tremor in his voice was gone. "Because everyone deserves a hot coffee on a day like this," Molly said simply. "And because I know what it's like to count pennies and come up short." "Don't worry about it." "That was your own money," he noted. "I'm not going to starve over $3.50, she lied again. "Drink up. It'll get cold." She went back to work. She didn't see the old man pull a small, sleek smartphone from his tattered inner pocket, a device that cost more than her car. She didn't see him type a single message. Found her. Phase 1 complete. 20 minutes later, the old man left. He left no tip. He had no cash, after all. But under the napkin, he left a small, metallic business card. It was blank, save for a QR code embossed in gold. Molly swept it into the trash with the crumbs, not looking at it. She was too busy worrying about the electricity bill. Outside, around the corner of the block, a long black Maybach idled against the curb. The driver, a man named Marcus with a neck as thick as a tree trunk, stepped out and opened the rear door with a white-gloved hand. The homeless old man straightened his posture. The stoop vanished. He handed his wet tweed coat to Marcus, revealing a bespoke Italian suit underneath. "Status, sir?" Marcus asked, closing the door as the old man settled into the heated leather seats. Arthur Sterling, owner of Sterling Dynamics and the 14th richest man in the country, sighed. He looked at the live feed on a tablet mounted in the console. It showed the interior of the diner. It showed Molly scrubbing the table he had just left. "She lied to her boss to protect my dignity, Marcus," Arthur said softly. "She has $40 to her name, and she spent 10% of it on a stranger she thought she'd never see again. Is she the one, Arthur?" Arthur looked at his own reflection in the darkened window. He saw the face of a man dying of pancreatic cancer, a man who had spent 50 years building an empire of steel and microchips but had failed to build a family. His actual relatives, his nephew Julian and his sister Beatrice, were vultures circling a carcass. They wanted his money, but they didn't care about his legacy. They would chop up Sterling Dynamics and sell it for parts within a week of his funeral. He needed someone with grit. Someone who understood the value of a dollar, not just the price of a stock. "We move to phase 2, Arthur commanded. "I want a full background check. Financials, medical history, criminal record. I want to know what she eats for breakfast and what keeps her up at night. And Marcus? Sir? Make sure Julian doesn't find out. If my nephew catches wind that I'm auditing a waitress for the CEO position, she won't survive the week." The boardroom of Sterling Dynamics was located on the 80th floor of the Sterling Tower in downtown Manhattan, a continent away from the rainy streets of Seattle. The room was glass and steel, cold and imposing. Julian Sterling sat at the head of the table, spinning a Mont Blanc pen between his fingers. He was 42, handsome in a jagged, predatory way, with eyes that constantly scanned the room for weakness. He wasn't the CEO, not yet. But as the chief operating officer and Arthur's only nephew, he acted like the throne was already his. "Where is Arthur?" Julian asked, his voice echoing in the silence. The 6 other board members shifted uncomfortably. "He is taking a sabbatical," said Eleanor Vance, no relation to Molly, the company's chief legal officer. For his health. His health, Julian scoffed. He's dying, Eleanor. We all know it. The old man is rotting from the inside out. And yet, he refuses to sign the power of attorney. Julian slammed the pen down on the mahogany table. He is spending company resources. The corporate jet logged a flight to Seattle yesterday. Why Seattle? We have no holdings in Seattle. We shut down the Pacific manufacturing plant 3 years ago. Perhaps he is visiting old friends, a board member suggested weakly. Arthur has no friends, Julian snapped. He killed them all in the 80s to get where he is. Julian stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city he intended to rule. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it, then checked it. It was a text from a contact simply labeled, "The Cleaner." The text read, "The old man is playing games. He was spotted in a diner in Seattle, dressed like a bum. Investigating a girl." Julian's eyes narrowed. He typed back, "Who is she?" Reply, "Nobody. A waitress. Name is Molly Vance." Julian stared at the screen. A waitress? Was Arthur going senile? Or was this one of his tests? Arthur was famous for his eccentricity. He once promoted a janitor to VP of logistics because the man organized the cleaning closet by color code. He's looking for an heir, Julian whispered to the glass reflection. A cold fury settled in his gut. He had spent 20 years enduring Arthur's insults, cleaning up his messes, and waiting for the old man to die so he could finally strip the company for assets and buy his own island. He wasn't going to let some diner waitress steal his birthright. Meeting adjourned, Julian announced abruptly, turning back to the room. I have urgent business to attend to. As the confused board members filed out, Julian dialed a number. Get me a file on Molly Vance, he ordered, and book me a flight to Seattle, first class, and tell security I want a tail on Arthur. I don't care if he's the CEO. I want to know every breath he takes. Back in Seattle, Molly's life was unraveling faster than she could stitch it back together. 2 days had passed since the incident with the old man. The rain hadn't stopped. She sat at the kitchen table of her studio apartment, a small room with peeling wallpaper and a radiator that clanked like a dying engine. Across from her sat a man in a cheap suit. He held a clipboard. I'm sorry, Ms. Vance, the man said, not sounding sorry at all. But the rent control agreement on this building has expired. The new owners, Omnicorp Real Estate, are adjusting rates to market value. Adjusting? Molly's voice was high and thin. You're doubling it. My rent is going from $800 to $1, $600? That's illegal. It is perfectly legal under the new zoning laws, the man said, standing up. You have 30 days to pay the new rate or vacate the premises. He placed a notice on the table and walked out, leaving the door slightly ajar. Molly put her head in her hands. She didn't cry. She was past crying. She was in the numb phase of survival mode. $1, $600. Plus her mother's care home fees, which were rising next month too. She needed a second job. No, she needed a miracle. Her phone rang. It was an unknown number. Usually, she ignored these debt collectors, but she was waiting for a call from the doctor about her mom. Hello? She answered. Is this Molly Vance? A woman's voice. Crisp, professional, British accent. Yes? My name is Sarah Jenkins. I represent a private philanthropic trust. We are looking for individuals with unique character profiles for a paid focus group. I'm not interested in surveys, Molly said, about to hang up. It pays $5,000 for a weekend of participation, the woman said quickly. Molly froze. Her thumb hovered over the end call button. $5,000? Cash. Tax-free. It's a behavioral study regarding workplace dynamics. We selected you based on a recommendation. Who recommended me? A former customer, Mr. Arthur. Molly frowned. I don't know an Arthur. He said he enjoyed the coffee, and that you paid for it. The old man. The homeless man. Wait, Molly said, standing up. The guy with the tweed coat? He has $5,000? Mr. Arthur is eccentric, the woman said. He wants to repay your kindness. The study takes place this weekend at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. If you attend, you get the check. No strings attached. It sounded like a scam. It had to be a scam. But scams usually asked you for money, they didn't offer it. And she was desperate. $5,000 would pay the back rent, the new rent, and 2 months of her mom's care. What do I have to do? Molly asked. Just show up Friday at 6 p.m., dress formally. A gown will be sent to your apartment tomorrow. A gown? For a focus group? As I said, Ms. Vance, it is a unique study. The line went dead. Molly stared at the phone. She felt a shiver run down her spine. It felt like she had just stepped off a cliff, hoping there was water below and not rocks. She didn't know that across town, in a penthouse suite overlooking the Space Needle, Julian Sterling was looking at photos of her. Photos of her walking to work. Photos of her visiting her mother at the nursing home. She's pretty, Julian murmured, taking a sip of scotch. In a desperate, tragic sort of way. He looked at the man standing in the shadows of the room, a man with a scar running through his eyebrow. This was Silas, Julian's fixer. She's going to the gala on Friday, Silas said. Arthur is disguising it as a study, but he's bringing her to the annual Sterling Foundation Gala. He's going to introduce her to the inner circle. Julian laughed, a cold, sharp sound. He's bringing a waitress to the Foundation Gala? He really has lost his mind. This is perfect. What do you want me to do? Silas asked. Let her go, Julian smiled. Let her put on the pretty dress. Let her think she's Cinderella. And then, right when she's standing in front of the press and the board, I want you to destroy her. Julian picked up a folder labeled Molly Vance, Debts. Plant the wallet, Julian said. Make it look like she didn't just pay for his coffee. Make it look like she stole his credit cards. We'll humiliate her so badly, she'll wish she never met Arthur Sterling. And then, we'll use the scandal to declare Arthur mentally incompetent. Julian raised his glass to the empty room. To charity, he sneered. Friday arrived with a vengeance. The skies over Seattle had turned a bruised purple, threatening a storm that matched the turmoil in Molly's stomach. At 4 p.m., a courier arrived at her studio apartment. He didn't look like a delivery guy. He looked like Secret Service. He held a long, black garment bag branded with the logo of Von Maur, but the hanger inside was velvet. Sign here, Ms. Vance, he said, his face impassive. Molly signed, her hand trembling. She carried the bag inside and unzipped it. The breath left her lungs. It wasn't just a gown. It was a weapon of mass distraction. Deep emerald green silk, floor length, with a neckline that was modest yet stunning. It looked expensive. Not department store expensive, mortgage expensive. Tucked into the bottom of the bag was a pair of silver heels and a note. For the part you must play. What focus group is this? Molly whispered to the empty room. She thought about calling it off. Her instinct, honed by years of poverty, screamed that nothing this good came without a hook. But then she looked at the unpaid bills stacked on her counter. She looked at the photo of her mother, smiling before the dementia stole her away. $5,000. She would walk through fire for that. She dressed. The silk felt like cool water against her skin. The shoes fit perfectly, a detail that should have terrified her. How did they know her shoe size? At 5:30 p.m., a town car, not a taxi, a Lincoln Continental, idled outside her building. The neighbors were peering through their blinds. Molly stepped out, shielding her hair from the drizzle, and slid into the leather back seat. The drive to the Fairmont Olympic Hotel was silent. The city lights blurred past, transforming from the flickering neons of her neighborhood to the steady, golden glow of downtown. When the car pulled up to the hotel, Molly realized her mistake. This wasn't a focus group. Valets were parking Ferraris and Bentleys. Red velvet ropes held back a throng of photographers. Men in tuxedos and women dripping in diamonds were gliding up the stairs. A banner hung above the entrance. The Sterling Foundation Annual Winter Gala. I can't go in there, Molly said, panic seizing her throat. Driver, there's a mistake. No mistake, ma'am, the driver said, opening her door. You are on the VIP list? Molly stepped onto the curb. The air smelled of exhaust and expensive perfume. She felt exposed. a fraud in borrowed silk. She clutched her small, worn-out purse, the only thing she owned that was truly hers, and walked toward the entrance. "Name?" the woman at the clipboard asked. She didn't look up. "Molly. Vance." The woman paused. She looked up, her eyes scanning Molly from head to toe. Her expression shifted from boredom to curiosity. "Ah, Ms. Vance. You're the special guest. Right this way." Molly was ushered past the line, past the metal detectors, and straight into the grand ballroom. It was dazzling. Crystal chandeliers the size of cars hung from the ceiling. A string quartet played Debussy in the corner. Waiters moved like ghosts, offering champagne flutes. Molly stood by a pillar, trying to blend into the architecture. She felt like an intruder. She was scanning the room for the exit when a voice spoke behind her. "You clean up well for a waitress." She spun around. It was the old man. But it wasn't the old man. Arthur Sterling stood there, leaning on a polished ebony cane with a silver wolf's head handle. The tweed coat was gone, replaced by a tuxedo that fit his frame with military precision. His hair was groomed, his face shaven. But the eyes, those piercing, intelligent blue eyes, were the same. "You," Molly gasped. You're not homeless." "And you're not a thief," Arthur said, a small smile playing on his lips. "Though my nephew might disagree. Who are you?" "I am Arthur Sterling. And you, my dear, are the only person in this city who gave a damn about me when I had nothing to offer." Molly's mind reeled. Sterling. The name on the banner. The name on half the skyscrapers in Seattle. "You tricked me," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and relief. "The coffee. The wallet. It was a test?" "Life is a test, Molly. Most people fail. You didn't." Arthur gestured to the room. "I invited you here because I need to make a statement. My family, they are waiting for me to die. They think I am weak, senile. They think charity is a tax write-off, not a duty." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I am going to change my will, Molly. Tonight, I am going to leave the controlling interest of Sterling Dynamics to a trust, managed by someone with a heart. I wanted to see if such a person existed." Molly stared at him. "You want me?" "I want to mentor you. I want to give you a job. A real job. Not wiping tables, but helping people. Starting salary is $100,000 a year." Molly felt the floor sway. 100,000. It was a lifeline. It was freedom. I don't know what to say." "Say yes. But be warned." Arthur's face darkened. He looked across the room to where Julian Sterling was holding court with a group of bankers. "The sharks smell blood in the water. Stay close to me." Arthur took her arm and led her into the crowd. For the next hour, Molly was in a dream. Arthur introduced her to senators and tech moguls. He didn't introduce her as a waitress. He introduced her as a young woman of exceptional character. She saw Julian watching them. He stood near the bar, sipping a dark liquid. He didn't look angry. He looked amused. He raised his glass to her, a shark-like grin splitting his face. Molly felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "I need to use the ladies' room," Molly whispered to Arthur. The adrenaline was making her dizzy. "Of course. Take your time," Arthur said. "I will be at the podium. I have a speech to make." Molly made her way through the crowd. As she passed a waiter carrying a tray of empty glasses, a man bumped into her hard. "Watch it," the man snapped. He was short, with a scar through his eyebrow. It was Silas, though Molly didn't know his name. "I'm so sorry," Molly said, clutching her bag. "Just keep moving." Silas grunted, brushing past her. Molly didn't feel the hand slip into her unzipped purse. She didn't feel the heavy, platinum credit card being slid between her compact and her phone. She just felt the rudeness of the collision and hurried toward the restroom. Inside the marble-tiled bathroom, she splashed cold water on her face. $100,000. She could move her mom to a private room. She could go back to school. She looked at herself in the mirror. You can do this, Molly. Just get through the night. She dried her hands, grabbed her purse, and headed back out. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. Arthur Sterling was walking to the microphone. The room went silent. Ladies and gentlemen, Arthur began, his voice surprisingly strong. Tonight is about legacy. It is about what we leave behind when the money is gone. Molly stood near the back, smiling. She didn't see the two large security guards moving through the darkness, flanking her on either side. She didn't see Julian Sterling nod to the head of security. The trap was sprung. Excuse me, miss. The voice was low and hard. Molly turned to see a security guard, a man the size of a vending machine, looming over her. Yes, she whispered, trying to listen to Arthur's speech. We need you to come with us. Quietly. What? Why? Mr. Sterling invited me. We know who you are, the guard said, grabbing her elbow. His grip was like iron. Let go of me. Molly's voice rose, cracking the silence of the room. Heads turned. On stage, Arthur paused mid-sentence, shielding his eyes against the spotlight to see the commotion. What is going on there? Arthur boomed into the microphone. Julian Sterling stepped out from the shadows near the stage. He grabbed a second microphone. I'm sorry, Uncle Arthur. I tried to handle this discreetly, but security caught her. Caught who? Caught her doing what? Arthur demanded. Julian pointed a manicured finger straight at Molly. The spotlight swiveled, blinding her. She threw her hand up, blinking, terrified. That woman, Julian announced, his voice smooth as silk, projecting to the entire room. We've been tracking her. She's a grifter, a con artist who targets the elderly. A gasp rippled through the crowd. That's a lie, Molly screamed, struggling against the guard. Arthur, tell them! Arthur looked confused. He took a step forward, but suddenly he swayed. His hand went to his chest. The stress, the lights, the sudden shouting. It hit his frail heart like a hammer. He stumbled, gripping the podium for support. Uncle! Julian yelled, feigning panic. He rushed to Arthur's side, supporting him, but effectively silencing him. Get him a medic! He's having an episode! As Arthur was swarmed by handlers, Julian took control of the stage. He looked down at Molly with mock pity. This woman targeted my uncle at a diner 3 days ago, Julian told the captivated audience. She saw a confused old man and she preyed on him. She gained his trust to get into this party. I paid for his coffee, Molly cried, tears streaming down her face. He forgot his wallet. Did he? Julian's voice turned cold. Or did? You steal it, Julian signaled the security guard. Empty her bag. No, you can't. The guard ripped the purse from Molly's hands and upended it onto a nearby banquet table. Lipstick, keys, a tampon. And her phone clattered out. And there, gleaming under the chandelier lights, was a black card. Not just any card. The Sterling Obsidian card. The crowd murmured. That's Arthur's personal credit card, Julian declared, his voice dripping with vindication. He reported it missing 3 days ago, the same day he met you. Molly stared at the card. Her blood ran cold. I've never seen that before. That man, the one who bumped into me. Save it for the police, Julian sneered. You stole from a dying man. You used his dementia against him to get a gown, an invite, and his credit card. Molly looked toward the stage. Arthur was being wheeled off in a chair, an oxygen mask over his face. He was reaching out a hand toward her, weak and trembling, but Julian stood between them, a wall of malice. Get her out of here, Julian commanded, and call the NYPD. I want to press full charges. The security guards hauled Molly toward the exit. She wasn't walking, she was being dragged. The eyes of the elite bore into her, judgment, disgust, amusement. They didn't see a victim. They saw the entertainment. Please, Molly begged, looking at the faces of the people she had admired just minutes ago. I didn't do it. I'm innocent. No one stepped forward. No one spoke up. They threw her out the back entrance, into the loading dock alley. She landed hard on the wet pavement, scraping her hands and tearing the beautiful emerald silk at the knee. Her purse was tossed after her. "You're lucky Mr. Julian doesn't want a scene with the cops inside," the head guard spat. "If you're still here in 5 minutes, you're going to jail." The heavy metal door slammed shut with a finality that echoed in her bones. Molly lay on the wet asphalt. The rain soaked the gown instantly, turning the silk heavy and dark. The cold seeped into her skin, but the shame burned hotter. She had been played. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was an execution. Julian had destroyed her credibility, isolated Arthur, and framed her, all in under 10 minutes. She sat up, shivering violently. Her mascara ran down her cheeks in black streaks. She reached for her phone to call. Who? She had no money for a lawyer. Rick would fire her the moment he heard about this, if he hadn't already. She was ruined. Molly pulled her knees to her chest and sobbed. The sound was lost in the drumming of the rain against the dumpsters. But then, a shadow fell over her. She flinched, expecting the police, or perhaps Silas coming to finish the job. She looked up. Standing at the end of the alley, illuminated by the streetlight, was a figure. It wasn't a cop. It was a young man, perhaps late 20s, wearing a leather jacket and a hoodie. He was leaning against a motorcycle, smoking a cigarette. He had been watching the back exit. He pushed off the wall and walked toward her. Molly scrambled back against the brick wall. "Stay away from me!" The man stopped. He flicked the cigarette into a puddle. "Rough night?" he asked. His voice was gravelly, but not unkind. "Go away." "I saw what happened on the monitors," the man said. "I work A/V for the hotel. They cut the feed, but I saw the guy put the card in your bag." Molly froze. You saw it?" "Yeah. Short guy. Ugly scar." The man reached into his jacket pocket. "I also recorded it. Security cameras are looped, but my backup drive isn't." He held up a USB drive. It was small, silver, and shone in the dim light like a beacon of hope. "Why are you telling me this?" Molly asked, wiping the rain from her eyes. "Because I hate guys like Julian Sterling," the man said. "Name's Jack. And if you want to take that bastard down, you're going to need a ride. Because the cops are definitely on their way." Molly looked at the hand he offered. It was calloused and stained with grease. It was the hand of a worker. She looked at the closed door of the hotel, where her life had just been dismantled. Then she looked at Jack. She had nothing left to lose. Molly Vance took his hand and pulled herself up. The emerald dress was ruined, but her eyes were dry now. The sadness was gone, replaced by something colder, harder. "Take me out of here," she said, "and then show me that video." The war for the Sterling Empire had just begun, and the waitress was no longer fighting with kindness. She was fighting for revenge. The motorcycle roared through the flooded streets of Seattle, a mechanical beast cutting through the storm. Molly clung to Jack's waist, her face pressed against the rough leather of his jacket. The wind whipped her wet hair into a frenzy, but the cold air felt good. It numbed the stinging humiliation that was burning her skin. They didn't stop until they reached the industrial district, pulling into the freight elevator of a converted warehouse. Jack killed the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. "You okay back there?" Jack asked, kicking the kickstand down. Molly slid off the bike, her legs wobbly. She looked around. The space was a chaotic mix of living quarters and a hacker's den. Server racks hummed in the corner, illuminated by blue LED strips. Monitors lined one wall, displaying complex code and security feeds. It smelled of soldering iron and stale pizza. "Where are we?" Molly asked, her voice raspy. "My place. Or, as my landlord calls it, a fire hazard," Jack said, pulling off his helmet. He had a sharp jawline and eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in a week. He tossed Molly a towel. "Dry off, you're shivering." Molly wrapped the towel around her shoulders. "Why help me, Jack? You could lose your job at the hotel." Jack walked over to a bank of monitors and started typing furiously. "I lost that job the minute I walked out that door with you. And frankly, I don't care. Julian Sterling fired my father 3 years ago, just before his pension vested." The stress gave him a stroke. "I've been waiting for a chance to stick a wrench in Julian's gears." He hit a key, and a video file popped up on the main screen. "Come look at this." Molly stepped forward. The footage was grainy, taken from a high angle in the ballroom. It showed Molly walking toward the bathroom. It showed Silas, the man with the scar, intentionally shoulder-checking her. And there, clear as day in 4K resolution, his hand slipped into her purse, depositing the black card. He planted it, Molly whispered, a fresh wave of anger washing over her. I knew it. It's a classic setup, Jack said. But having the video isn't enough. Look at this. He switched screens to a newsfeed. CNN, Fox, and Twitter were all running the same story. A picture of Molly, an unflattering one from her driver's license, was plastered next to the headline. The Coffee Pot Con: How a Waitress Swindled Dying Billionaire Arthur Sterling. Julian moved fast, Jack muttered. He spun the narrative. The police have a warrant out for your arrest for grand larceny and elder abuse. If you walk into a police station with this video, the cops, who are likely on Julian's payroll, will just lose the drive and throw you in a cell. Molly sank onto a beat-up sofa. So I'm a fugitive? I can't go home. I can't go to work. My mom, she gasped. Oh God, my mom. If Julian controls Arthur's money, he controls the payments to the care home. He'll cut her off, Jack said grimly. That's how he squeezes you. He wants you to plead guilty to save her. Molly stared at the floor. The beautiful emerald dress was stained with grease and mud, a symbol of her ruined night. But beneath the silk, the fighter was waking up. She remembered Arthur's eyes in the diner. He had seen something in her. Grit. I'm not going to plead guilty, Molly said, standing up. Arthur was going to change his will. That's why Julian panicked. That's why he did this tonight. Correct, Jack said. I tapped into the Sterling internal comms. There is an emergency board meeting scheduled for 9 a.m. on Monday. Julian is filing a motion to have Arthur declared mentally incompetent due to the stress of the scandal. If the board votes yes, Julian becomes permanent CEO and power of attorney. Arthur gets locked away in a high-end asylum and you go to prison. Where is Arthur now? Molly asked. Sterling Private Medical Center. Penthouse floor. Maximum security. No visitors. Molly paced the room. We have to stop that vote. How? We can't get into the boardroom. Sterling Tower is a fortress. Retinal scanners, armed guards, the works. Molly stopped pacing. She looked at the monitors, then at her ruined dress, then at Jack. You worked A/V for the hotel, she said. Do you have access to the Sterling Tower systems? I have back doors, Jack admitted. But they are digital. I can't physically get you past the lobby. I don't need you to get me past the lobby, Molly said, her eyes narrowing. I'm a waitress, Jack. I'm invisible. People don't look at the help. They look through them. She walked over to the table and picked up the USB drive. We're not going to the police, she declared. We're going to crash that board meeting. We're going to play that video on the big screen in front of the entire board. And we're going to get Arthur to that meeting. That's insane, Jack said, a grin slowly spreading across his face. It's a heist. Breaking into a billionaire's headquarters? He hired me to fix his company, Molly said, tightening the towel like a cape. I'm just showing up for my first day of work. Sunday was a blur of preparation. Molly cut her hair. The long, flowing brunette waves were chopped into a sharp, efficient bob, dyed a severe black. It changed the shape of her face, making her look harder, older. Jack worked the digital angle. He fabricated an ID badge for Oasis Catering, the company that serviced the executive suites of Sterling Tower. He hacked the scheduling mainframe to add 2 extra staff members to the Monday morning shift. You sure you can handle the tech? Molly asked, watching him solder a small device into a serving tray. This, Jack said, holding up the silver platter, is a portable signal jammer and a wireless transmitter. Once you get this into the boardroom, I can override the projector from the van outside. But you have to get it within 20 feet of the main console. I'll put it right under Julian's nose, Molly promised. Monday morning arrived with a sky of steel gray. The rain had stopped, but the fog was thick. At 7:30 a.m., a white Oasis catering van pulled up to the loading dock of Sterling Tower. Molly sat in the passenger seat, wearing a crisp white shirt, black vest, and black trousers. She wore thick-rimmed glasses and no makeup. She looked nothing like the glamorous woman from the gala. She looked like a server. Jack was driving, wearing a matching uniform. "Checkpoint," Jack whispered. A security guard with a clipboard walked up to the window. "ID?" Jack handed over the forged badges. The guard scanned them. The Vorper Charishid. Light blinked green. "You're late," the guard grumbled. "Mr. Sterling wants the coffee service set up by 8:45 sharp. He's in a mood." "Traffic was killer," Jack said smoothly. "Go on." "Freight elevator B." They were in. The elevator ride to the 80th floor was agonizingly slow. Molly checked the silver platter in her hands. It was loaded with croissants and danishes, hiding the circuit board beneath. "Remember," Jack whispered as the numbers climbed. "I'm going to the A/V closet on the 79th floor to cut the hard lines. You have to go to the boardroom on the 80th. Once you're in, you're on your own until the broadcast starts." "What about Arthur?" Molly asked. "I tracked his vitals monitor. He's not at the hospital anymore." Molly froze. "What?" "They moved him this morning. He's in the executive suite, adjacent to the boardroom. Julian wants him close to sign the papers the second the vote passes." "That's better," Molly said, her heart pounding. "If he's on the floor, I can get to him." The elevator dinged at the 79th floor. Jack squeezed her shoulder. "Good luck, boss." He stepped out with a cart of water bottles. The doors closed, and Molly continued alone to the 80th. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world of hushed power. The carpet was thick, the walls lined with modern art. Security guards stood at every corner, earpieces wired in. Molly kept her head down, clutching the tray. She walked with purpose. "I belong here. I am just the help." "Hey, you!" Molly stopped. A massive guard blocked her path. "Catering?" he barked. "Breakfast for the board," Molly said, keeping her voice flat and bored. "Check the tray," the guard said to his partner. Molly's breath hitched. If they lifted the false bottom, the second guard poked a gloved finger into a croissant. "Looks fresh. Go ahead. But don't make eye contact with Mr. Sterling." He fired the last girl for looking at him. "Understood." Molly walked past them, her knees shaking. She pushed through the double mahogany doors of the boardroom. The room was imposing. A 40-foot table sat in the center. Julian Sterling sat at the head, looking immaculate and terrifying. 10 other board members sat around him, looking somber. "The motion is simple," Julian was saying, his voice smooth. "Arthur's mental decline is tragic, but undeniable. The incident with the waitress was the final straw. We must protect the company." Molly moved silently to the side credenza. She placed the tray down, within 20 feet of Julian's laptop. Phase 1 complete. Now she needed Arthur. She spotted a side door guarded by Silas. That had to be the executive suite. Molly poured a cup of coffee. She walked toward Silas. "Coffee, sir?" she asked softly. Silas looked down at her. He didn't recognize her with the black hair and glasses. He sneered. "Get lost." Mr. Sterling insisted everyone be caffeinated. She pressed, stepping closer. Silas took the cup. As he raised it to his lips, Molly deliberately stumbled. She slammed into him, knocking the hot coffee all over his shirt and crotch. "You stupid BCCH!" Silas roared, jumping back and grabbing his burning shirt. "I'm so sorry. Let me help," Molly cried, grabbing napkins and creating a chaotic flurry of movement. In the confusion, she wasn't wiping his shirt. She was lifting the keycard from his belt. "Get off me!" Silas shoved her away hard. Molly hit the wall but clutched the card in her palm. "Get out!" Silas yelled. "Go clean yourself up!" Molly scurried away, but not toward the exit. She ducked into the small alcove leading to the executive suite and swiped the card. The light turned green. She slipped inside and locked the door behind her. The room was dim, smelling of antiseptic. Arthur Sterling lay in a hospital bed set up in the middle of the office, hooked up to an IV. He looked pale, skeletal. "Arthur?" Molly whispered. The old man's eyes fluttered open. They were hazy, drugged. Molly? He rasped. Am I dead? Not yet, she said, rushing to his side. She checked the IV bag. Sedatives. She ripped the needle out of his arm. We have to go. Now. They took my company, Arthur whispered, a tear leaking from his eye. Julian. He hasn't taken it yet, Molly said fiercely, but he's about to. Can you walk? I don't know. You have to. Molly pulled him up. He was heavy, dead weight. You have to walk into that room and look him in the eye. You're the Iron Wolf, remember? Arthur groaned, his legs shaking. But as he looked at Molly, this waitress who had risked everything to break into a fortress for him, a spark returned to his eyes. The fog cleared just enough. Get me my cane, he growled. Molly grabbed the ebony cane from the chair. She handed it to him. Let's go fire my nephew, Arthur said. In the boardroom, Julian was wrapping up. All in favor of motion 224, granting full control to the COO? Hands began to rise. 1, 2, 5. Suddenly, the massive screen behind Julian flickered. The corporate logo vanished, replaced by static. What is this? Julian snapped. Technical support! The static cleared. The video from the gala began to play. The board members lowered their hands. They watched in silence as the footage showed Silas planting the card. They watched the frame-up unfold in high definition. This is fake! Julian yelled, standing up, his face turning red. This is a deep fake! Turn it off! It's not fake, Julian. A voice boomed from the side door. The doors swung open. Molly Vance stood there, still in her catering uniform, supporting Arthur Sterling. Arthur looked terrible, but he stood upright, leaning on his cane like a king holding a scepter. Uncle, Julian whispered, the color draining from his face. You should be resting. And you should be in handcuffs, Arthur said, his voice cutting through the room. Molly stepped forward, removing her glasses. She looked directly at the board. My name is Molly Vance, she said, her voice steady. I didn't steal that card. But Julian Sterling stole your trust. Julian lunged for the security button on the table. Security! Get them out! He's delirious! She's dangerous! The doors burst open again. But it wasn't security. It was the police. Real police. Led by a detective holding a tablet with the video Jack had just emailed to the precinct, CCing every major news outlet in the city. Julian Sterling, the detective said, we have a few questions about fraud, filing a false police report, and conspiracy. Julian looked at the board. They were all staring at him with cold, hard eyes. He looked at Arthur. Arthur just pointed his cane at the door. Get out of my chair. The silence in the boardroom was absolute, broken only by the click of handcuffs as the NYPD escorted a screaming Julian Sterling out of the double doors. Arthur Sterling slumped into his leather chair, the adrenaline finally leaving his frail body. The board members, the titans of Seattle industry, looked from the empty doorway to the old man they had written off. Mr. Sterling, Vice Chairman Henderson stammered, loosening his tie. We had no idea Julian was compromised. This is unprecedented. It is not unprecedented, Arthur rasped, his voice weak but eyes sharp as flint. It is negligence. You were too busy watching the stock price to notice the rot in the foundation. He gestured to Molly, who stood beside him, her waitress uniform stark against the mahogany luxury. This is Molly Vance. As of this moment, she is my personal proxy. She speaks with my voice. Sir, Henderson objected. She's service staff. She has no experience. Molly stepped forward, removing her thick-rimmed glasses. She didn't flinch. I manage high-volume inventory, balance daily cash flows to the penny, and handle conflict resolution with hostile clients on 4 hours of sleep, she said, her voice cutting through the room. And I just infiltrated your fortress with a croissant tray and a fake ID because your security is as arrogant as your leadership. I think I'll manage, Arthur chuckled. Class dismissed. 3 months later, the rain still fell on Seattle, but from the 80th floor of the Sterling Tower, it looked like diamonds against the glass. Molly sat in an office larger than her entire former apartment. The nameplate on the door read, Molly Vance, Director of the Sterling Charitable Trust. She wasn't CEO yet, Arthur was too smart to hand over the keys before she learned to drive, but she was learning fast. Tutors from Wharton and legal experts occupied her days. Grant applications occupied her nights. Jack, now the head of cybersecurity, knocked and entered. He wore a suit, but kept his high-top sneakers. Update on Julian, Jack said with a grin. The audit found the offshore accounts. The feds are tacking on another 10 years. And Silas took a plea deal to testify against him. Good, Molly said, signing a document. Justice is a slow wheel, but it grinds fine. You have a visitor. No appointment, but he says he knows you. Molly looked up as Rick, the manager of Jerry's diner, walked in. He looked small. He twisted his grease-stained hat in his hands, sweat beading on his forehead. Molly, Rick said, his voice trembling, the diner, it's going under. Since the news broke about how I treated you, people are boycotting. I was hoping, for old time's sake, a donation? Molly stood and walked to the window. The man who had screamed at her for years, who would have let Arthur freeze, was now begging. I am going to buy the building, Rick, she said. Rick's face lit up. Oh, thank you. You won't regret it. I'm turning it into a soup kitchen. She interrupted coldly. Free meals, no judgment, no kicking people out into the rain. Rick's smile vanished. But, my job? We need a dishwasher, Molly said. 6 a.m. start, don't be late. Rick gaped, realized she was serious, and hung his head in defeat as he left. Brutal, Arthur said, stepping out from the private adjoining room. He looked healthier, the color returning to his cheeks. Necessary, Molly replied. How's the heart? Stronger. Especially since I found an heir worth a damn. Arthur walked to the door and grabbed his coat. Get your things, kid. Where are we going? It's Tuesday. It's raining. I need a coffee. Arthur pulled out a wallet, thick with cash, and winked. And this time, I'm buying. Molly laughed. A sound of pure freedom. She grabbed her coat and followed the billionaire out. She had paid $3.50 for a coffee, and in return, she had purchased a destiny. What started as a simple act of kindness in a rundown diner became a revolution. Molly Vance didn't see a billionaire. She saw a human being in need. In a world obsessed with status, she proved that integrity is the only currency that truly matters. Julian Sterling had the bloodline and the billions, but he was bankrupt where it counted. Molly had nothing but $40 and a good heart, and that ended up being enough to buy the world. If this story touched you, or if you believe that kindness always comes back around, hit that like button. It helps us share this message with the world. What would you have done in Molly's shoes? Would you have risked your last dollars for a stranger? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell for more stories about karma, justice, and the twists of fate. Thanks for watching.